Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce for the last session of the afternoon, Henrietta Pringle from TVERC, that's the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre. Henrietta is a biological recording coordinator at TVERC, working with volunteers and recording groups to increase the quality and quantity of wildlife records. She lists her interests as ecologist, researcher, survey coordinator and trainee birdringer. She'll be telling us this afternoon about a couple of big digitisation projects carried out by TVERC volunteers to input thousands of paper records into the database so that they are available to decision makers. So, ladies and gentlemen, Henrietta.
Lovely, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay in the room and in the ether?
Yep, we can hear you virtually.
Great, perfect. So yes, thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, it's great to actually be here in person and talk in real life. So thank you very much. So I just wanted to take you through a couple of the big digitisation projects that we've been working on, rather similar to some of the stuff that Catty was talking about earlier. So I'll sort of carry on from there, really. Sorry. Lovely, thank you. So just a very quick introduction to TVERC. So we are the local environmental record centre for here. We cover Oxfordshire and Berkshire. So you're all in the recording community, so hopefully you all know our role. But we take raw data and we process it, interpret it, and make it available to environmental decision makers, developers, landowners, researchers, etc. And we produce sort of tangible outputs, reports, data sets, and maps. So our aim is to make sure that decisions are data driven and it's high quality data from our recorders, which is where all you come in. And this is the area that we cover, Oxfordshire and Berkshire. And our aim is to really boost records and make sure that it's the highest quality data that is driving these decisions. So just to tell you a bit about who we are, we're slightly fewer than that. We're not quite 10 staff at the moment, and some of us are part-time. We're all still working from home at the moment. But then we have a lot of volunteers that really we couldn't really function without. So we have office volunteers, again, they're remote, so they're not technically office, and they do our kind of data management tasks, which are really crucial. To validate our data and check locations and things like that. And then we also have survey volunteers. So we do the local wildlife sites project, is where we go out and assess local wildlife sites, those that are sort of important for wildlife and should be considered in development. And so we have to assess those every 10 years. And so we have staff that go out and do that, but we're always keen for more help with that, particularly we do a sort of baseline botanical habitat survey, but we're really keen to have help from sort of special interest groups as well. And then lastly, that sort of that final section are the recording groups, organisations and individuals. So we rely on volunteers and local naturalists for our records. 70% of our data comes from volunteers, and we get some from ecological consultants, but the vast majority is from people just doing it in their spare time. So we recently passed the 4 million species record mark, which we were very chuffed with. So that was back in February. And of those, about 790,000 are protected and notable species. So again, those that should be sort of considered a high priority species, whether they're protected or they're scarce or rare for the area, that sort of thing. And you'll see there, we entered 630,000 records into the database last year. And again, we obviously want to make sure it's the most robust data. So it goes through strict processes of verification. So that all takes a considerable amount of time. And again, that's where our volunteers come in. So I wanted to take you through a couple of these digitisation projects that we've been working on. So the first one is the Jo Dunn archive. So this is Jo here. This is on her 90th birthday. This is in Otmore, and she was a botanist. She was sort of, from all accounts, sort of amazingly proficient and very dedicated. She operated in West Oxfordshire. She retired to Charlbury and did a lot of botanising around there. She contributed a huge stream of records to the flora of Oxfordshire, and then one of her main projects was the Flora of Digley, which was published in 1993. And that was a sort of culmination of 7 years of work of combing through the Digley estate. And then she also founded the Cotswold Rare Plants Group, which then became the Wychwood Flora Group. Sadly, she actually passed away in 2020, 2 days after her 100th birthday. Of COVID, but yeah, she was a fantastic lady by all accounts. And the Wychwood Flora Group actually then donated all her records to us, which was brilliant. So this is how they arrived in boxes with files and box files, and inside. We had various record cards, photographs, all sorts of things. And we knew that this was going to be an amazing source of material, and we asked one of our volunteers, Nick Barber, to see what he could make of it and digitise these records. He took a look at it. So he's a member of the Wychwood Flora Group and a keen botanist himself. So he was, I don't think he found it too trying a task, but he took a look at it and said, right, this will be a year to undertake. And he said, there were postcards, site lists, photographs. There were also handwritten, hand-drawn maps that she'd done of the sites where she'd been recording. And as Kathy was saying earlier, there were, there were some files that had masses of records and some that were just more kind of sort of like in the form of diaries and stuff that had the odd record here and there. So Nick had the job of kind of sifting through all that and trying to, pick out the best out of such a high quality archive. And also what's striking is if you go through the records, there's so many other botanists that obviously worked with her that are mentioned in throughout the archive that recorded with her. So this is what had to be done, was all those paper records had to then be transformed into this spreadsheet. And having said that it would take him a year to do, 4 months later, 100 working hours, we inputted 15,000 records to the database. So this is what it looked like, the spread of the data over the years. So it does go back as far as 1951, and we had sort of a couple of records then, and up to 2006, but you can see the main peak of her recording was sort of late 1980s. And this is just a sort of spread of the records. The vast majority were flowering plants. 98% of the records were higher plants, but there's the odd rogue thing that gets in there as well. And then we come on to the sort of the most recorded. So if you go by sort of the species that are recorded most on, that appear most on site, so by number of sites, that's things like hogweed, creeping buttercup, nettle, that sort of thing. But in terms of actual number of records, we've got the meadow clary, which is this one, and the downy woundwort, which is actually it's a threatened plant. It's rare in Oxfordshire, and this was one of her great passions. So she actually, on one of her walks in 1984, she found this plant on a grassy lane, on a grass verge. And obviously knowing how special it was, she set about monitoring it, protecting it from rabbits, doing site report management information, and then monitoring it at various other sites. So actually in the archive, there's 102 records of this plant covering 16 different sites. And eventually that green lane was designated as a triple SI due to the work of Jo and this fantastic plant that she found. And then these are the ones that sort of we only appear on 1 or 2 sites. So the greater water parsnip is, again, it's a rare species for Oxfordshire. It's red listed, it's endangered. This is the water ardens, which was found on 1 site, and then the purple milk vetch, which was found on a couple of sites, and again is rare and endangered. So there's some great things in the archive that she found. So really, this is a fantastic example of this great wealth of data that was sitting in paper files and is now available. Thanks to the work of our volunteer, it's now available for decision makers to access, and then they can see what used to be on sites, because it's really important to have that historical knowledge and look at that baseline so that you're looking far back enough to get a decent picture of the state of nature, really. The next project I wanted to talk about were the churchyard surveys. So these were surveys in Oxfordshire and Berkshire, and they were sort of the brainchild of Roy Maycock and Aaron Woods. And so in Oxfordshire, these 341 churchyards were surveyed in 1989 to 93. And they were each churchyard was surveyed twice, and sort of the taxa were just ticked off. And this was, for Oxfordshire, it was 3 kind of files of material, which culminated in 34,700 records entered into our database. Again, this fell down to Nick Barber. So he's quite a veteran of these digitisation projects. So he found that there was an average of 96 taxa per churchyard, and as you can see there, Drayton St Peter had the most taxa. So it kind of shows that churchyards are a real kind of great spot for biodiversity, and you've got organisations like Caring for God's Acre who are interested in sort of restoring and enhancing the biodiversity of churchyards. So digitising these records again is really, really important. So in Oxfordshire, the most common species were things like ivy, daisy, dandelion, and these 10 species all occurred in more than 90% of the sites. But there are some rarities as well. So maple-leaved goosefoot, that is rare in Oxfordshire and declining, and that's only turned up in 2 sites. So that was found in a churchyard. And these other species, all scarce and mostly declining. There are some that possibly they're scarce because they're under-recorded, but it's really vital to have all this data now in digital form. And a similar exercise was done for Berkshire. So this was done by Charlie Linton, and these surveys were 1985 to 2000, and 15,000 plant records were entered. Again, there were quite a few other taxa as well. Birds, invertebrates, that sort of thing, and roughly similar numbers of taxa recorded. So again, just churchyards are a great place to do your recording, provided you've got permission and things. So that's sort of a whistle-stop tour of our digitisation projects, and there's always more to digitise, as mentioned before. We've got lots of archive material which needs to go in, so we're always keen for help. So I just wanted to sort of point you to support for recording. So as I say, we're keen to boost records and increase the quality of records. So these are the various different things we can support you. So we can have data agreements where you share your data with us, but also we give you the data as well. So that can be species records or any information on sites as well. And then we also have equipment and books to loan out. I visited our book storage recently, and this is just a couple of shelves worth. We've got quite a lot more. And we have a list of equipment as well that's available to borrow as well. We also operate in conjunction with the Trust for Oxfordshire's Environment. We do a grant specifically for biodiversity monitoring in Oxfordshire and Berkshire. So we encourage applications for those. And then lastly, we have conferences and field days. They've been somewhat disrupted over the past few years, but we're hoping to get those back on track. So I just wanted to sort of finish with a plea for volunteers. So you've heard obviously about how important our sort of data management volunteers are. We're really keen to get more people helping out with that, but also our field surveyors as well. If you are experienced in botanizing or any other specialist interests, so whether it's bird, invertebrates, do get in touch, because the local wildlife sites, they can be a real treat to survey, particularly the ones that you can't normally access. So do drop us a line there. And lastly, I just wanted to thank the Witchwood Flora Group for donating Joe's records, and Nick Barber, Charlie Linton for digitising the archive, and Craig Blackwell for providing that photo of Joe. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, are there any questions?
Thank you. Elaine from TVERC. We did a similar project with an archive of data from Washington. We applied the HS funding. I wanted to consider applying for funding for projects like this, or do you just consider it part of your day-to-day work?
As far as I know, we haven't ever considered that, but that's a very useful thing to bear in mind. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, thanks for the tip.
Do we have any questions that have come up in the chat?
No, we haven't had anything in the chat.
Well, thanks, Tim. Well, Henrietta, thank you for a wonderful talk. You off the book now. Thank you.